So I really loved that conversation.
It's so powerful, London. And I agree. I think, there's so many of us that wish in our middle school, high school, college that there were classes really preparing us for like real life. I understand learning about math and history and science and all that stuff is so important, but I always wished when I was in my high school, I can't even count to like tell you how many times I was sitting, in my class staring out at the clouds. I was always so creative and free spirited, and I always felt like a tug and a calling just towards being an entrepreneur, even at like a young age when it wasn't really cool or there wasn't a class about it. I remember staring out in the clouds, and just really thinking like I. I was like, I just always feel like I'm just different. Something in me just doesn't, I don't resonate with math. And although those classes are great, like I was saying, I always wish that there was a class about mental health or just how to listen to your intuition or what is happiness. And I just think that so many young adults, because there are no classes, so many young adults, feel like so just embarrassed and ashamed and awkward when they're hit 25, 30, when you're really evolving into an adult. And they're like, wait, I'm not happy in this 9 to 5 or in this relationship. Wait, I feel so out of alignment. Like I'm depressed. It's because you're probably not listening to your intuition. You're probably not following your dreams, and you're settling and just doing things to be realistic and practical. And I just wish that when I was younger, they prepared us for like how to actually find a meaningful, purposeful life.
Mm. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I guess I'll pre-frame this part by saying like I'm not a parent. I'm
Yeah.
99% sure you're not a parent also, Megan, right? Yeah. But I was talking about this the other day and really thinking about this. Growing up, we often ask kids like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, doctor, lawyer, teacher,
Yes. Yeah.
a marine biologist, or like whatever.
Yeah.
But I always feel like that does such a disservice because number one, it presupposes that we have to choose one thing. And I know I can
So
speak for
true.
myself that like I thrive running multiple businesses. I love that I can
Wow.
be a master life coach, NLP practitioner. I love I can have my podcast. I love that I can
Yes.
have my beauty counter business. I love that I can do voiceover work. Like that part I just feel like fuels my creative energy. And so I think what a better question is like, how do you want to feel when you grow up? Like, what do you want to exude on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like? And I think, like, to your point of, okay, well, I'm in this 9 to 5, and all of a sudden I'm like in the soup. I drank the Kool-Aid, and
Right.
I didn't even like realize I had an option to have multiple avenues or streams of
Yes.
income.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I could wear multiple hats and that could be okay. So I often will ask my niece or kids that I work with, like, okay, well, like, how do you want to feel when you grow up? Like, what are experiences you want to
Right.
have, right? And to your point, like, if we're taught to listen to our intuition and to understand the differentiating factors between feelings of like happiness and joy and frustration and anger and sadness and
Yes.
like
Yeah.
tuning into these different voices, I just feel like that would be a much better question. Don't you think?
Yes, because when you teach young adults, because at that age, your brain is developing so much, like your frontal cortex, which controls emotional regulation, and like so much of you're growing into yourself, you're being stretched, you're having your first social, major relationship interactions, you're learning. For some people, it's the time when they have their first, romantic relationships, and you're having prom and all these things, and you're getting ready for college. It's so much change at once. And I always wished, yeah, like, why can't we have a class about really emotional intelligence and understanding our emotions? Because if you think about it, if you go through life, your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, always on autopilot, just, band-aid over bullet hole, like, oh, I'm fine, I'm just tired. Well, really, but it's like, why though? Every time you question, but why are you tired? You'll get to the root. It's like a method I call funnel thinking, where if you think about a funnel, at the top, it's very wide and broad, and it goes down to a narrow point. Anytime I, in my own life, because a therapist taught me that technique, anytime I, in my own life, feel like just, oh, I'm stressed. But I always am trained because of the therapist. I question it, but why am I stressed? Oh, well, I mean, it's, you get more specific, and then boom, you know your real root answer at the tip because it's narrow. And I always just wish, yeah, there was a class about like understanding our emotions, because you want to go through life being mindful. And that's why I love practices like journaling and breath work, and where you can actually label the emotion. And, you know, how do I feel? Well, I feel, you know, depressed or nostalgic, sad, not good enough, insecure, anxious, uncomfortable. Like really label it, and don't be afraid to label it. And that's a part two of what I wish was taught in my school was, you know, not having guilt or shame or embarrassment with these emotions. Like, you know, just knowing that it's so normal, and everyone, all 8 billion humans on this planet, we all feel the same emotions, just in a different way, and they manifest a little bit differently. But to know that anything related to mental health or just the holidays, it's a lot of emotions to navigate. It's so normal. Like knowing it's normal releases, because mental health can bring so much guilt and shame and embarrassment and isolation with it, but you gotta like let that go, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if we talked about this on our last episode. We might have, but the feelings wheel. Do you use the feelings wheel? Do you
I
know what that is?
love the feelings wheel.
Yeah, same. And for those of you listening, it's like, I think it's like thefeelingswheel.com or feelingswheel.com. You can just find it for free. And
Yes.
it's like this
Yes.
wheel of all these different colors and a lot of different words for different feelings and emotions. And at first, I thought I would be overwhelmed by having a lot of different
Yeah.
words for different feelings, but actually it was super empowering to be like,
Yep.
okay, what's the difference between like sadness and despair and resentment? And another book that I love is Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And she does a really good job at putting
Ooh.
like solid definitions to some of these emotions. And I think,
Yeah.
like you said, it might be like a closet that we think there's a monster in that we're like afraid to look in. But
Really.
I highly encourage anybody listening, and I'm sure you would too as well, Megan, like look at the feelings wheel, like just read through it,
Love
look through
that.
some of the different words, because there are some differences and it's not always just like mad, sad, glad, or like I think Brene Brown says it or someone said it, like Dr. Seuss words for our emotions,
Yeah.
like mad, sad, glad, bad. It's like there's so many other
Oh my gosh.
juicier options, don't you think?
Yes, I agree. And not just this, yeah, not just like, oh, I'm just tired. It's like, specify it a little bit, but what are you really? Are you feeling depressed, sad, fatigued, lethargic, burnt out? You know, really get, because the more, I've realized this, the more specific you get, you're only helping yourself feel better and actually figure out a solution and feeding, you know, filling your cup. I think sometimes people can be raised, depends on the household that you grow up in. I feel like I got lucky because, you know, I grew up in a household where my parents really encouraged my sister and I, like, feel your feelings. This is a safe household. Express yourself. We will hold the space for you. And I know not everyone grows up in households like that. And I think how you're raised, like from ages, you know, like you're like a sponge. You're absorbing your environment, and that like shapes your foundation. Of course, you can do healing work later on in life, but people really are raised and conditioned. Like when you're born, if you imagine like Play-Doh straight out of the can, no one has touched it, fresh. And then ages 2, 3, 4, you're slowly getting molded and shaped, different edges and morphed. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're 25 years old, your community, your household, religion, your parents' marriage, all of that shapes you and how you view the world, your belief about love, what is possible with money, what communication looks like. So if you grow up in a household where there is extreme like addiction and abuse and you're walking on eggshells all the time and it's like survival mode, not only is your nervous system wrecked, but that's like your normal because you grew up with that. So you're going to probably attract relationships that are toxic and very like survival mode, abusive. So it's like whatever we grow up with, we're a sponge for that environment. And you know, it's powerful because we, you know, we really just are like I said, we can do so much healing work, but like for me, I feel so grateful because, yeah, my parents were so encouraging. Like, whatever you're feeling is normal. And they did a great job of structure, discipline, but also allowing us to be creative and to explore our passions. And so I think a lot of people may not be super aware of how their, like childhood really affects the way that their mind is like wired.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. It's major. I think I really lucked out on the parents. In fact, I know I really lucked out on the parents card too. Looking back and remember, our memories are like only 50% accurate anyways, right? So it's like I
Yeah.
always pre-frame that too, because yeah, looking back, I definitely, my dad was a coach growing up, or he, was my whole life. And so it was definitely more like suck it up, find a way, figure it
Mm,
out. I don't think that my emotions and my wide range of emotions were as honored as maybe yours were. It was more just kind of like
yeah.
get over it, move on, find a way, push through.
Interesting.
And I'm really grateful for that, because now through this healing journey, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, hells yeah. I like that quality about me. I like my find a way, get her done, like push through,
Yeah.
mentality. But I've also found a little bit more softness and grace for myself, because
Yeah.
my parents were just imperfect beings, humans doing the best with the tools that they've had. And I love the work I've done on communication and this
Love
work,
it.
because now I get to have these really powerful and profound conversations with my parents.
Yeah.
And luckily, they're not like defensive of like, oh, like they're very open
Yeah.
to these conversations and open to improvement, which I absolutely love. But, you know, I know you do a lot of speaking and you go to like schools, high
Hmm.
schools, junior highs, all the things. Knowing that you've had the supportive, free spirit, be your creative self type of parents, how do you help students who don't have that?
That's a great question. And honestly, that comes up more times than you would even imagine. Like over my career, the past 10 years, if I think back on all of the, middle school, high schools, colleges, even Fortune 500 companies, but especially the schools that I've spoken at, you'd be so shocked as to how many kids grow up in households where they do not feel heard and seen and understood. And for me, I can sometimes tell, sometimes not, but I can sometimes tell the kids who really are growing up in difficult homes, because when I speak and when I share my stuff and it inspire them, they're like, what? It's like I'm opening a world that they never knew existed. They were like, wait, what I'm feeling has a name. It's anxiety.
Mm,
I'm not crazy. Like, oh, so maybe this relationship is toxic. Like they can label things. And I feel like for me to be able to give that gift to people of being able to label and identify emotions, mental health stuff, and what's okay, what's not okay, for me to be able to do that for other people is probably the greatest gift that I could ever ask for. It's really, like I said, giving a voice to the voiceless and being that person, that change maker for other people. Because I remember when I was in high school, even though I grew up in a great household, I still struggled so deeply with mental health issues because there was no conversation, no self awareness. And I just was like, oh, I'm just dying every day. It's normal. But I really am doing this for my younger self. And because I told myself, I never want any other student to feel this way. I felt so alone and so just like this weird secret little invisible illness. I felt so ashamed. But now I'm like the most open book and I'm so empowered by it, because you realize now I'm spiritual. So I'm like, it happened for a reason. But to answer your question, London, like all the schools that I've spoken at, there are so many kids that, also will listen to me talk. They don't ask me questions, but then after they'll find me on Instagram and they will say things, like, oh my gosh, you know, Megan, like I loved what you said and I'm sorry I didn't ask a question, and then they'll pour their heart out to me and they're like, my household is this, or I'm dating this guy right now and he makes me feel XYZ, like what should I do? And to me it's special because, they're still going to find me online and DM me. And I think it's powerful too, because I think with men and women, even though it's 2023, times are different. I think men and women can sometimes be raised differently when it comes to mental health and talking about emotions and being in touch with their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of guys that DM me on Instagram, they don't really ask questions in the talks, but they'll always find me online after. And they say things like, hey, Megan, you know, what you said was so powerful. And I've been going through, you know, this pressure to be like the perfect football player and excel and succeed and be the man and like have that hot girlfriend. And, but then guess what? They're still human beings. So they also feel like not good enough at times and insecure and worried about failing. And what if I don't impress my parents, and just all the pressure that can really make you have just like a breakdown. And so it's powerful when they find me online, but a lot of people, you'd be so shocked. It's a sad reality, but a lot of people grow up in households that are not supportive and not that safe space for you to like be a kid or a teenager. A lot of people have to grow up very quickly or take care of their parents, or, you know, so I just feel grateful I can use my stuff, you know, to be that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I hear you say is like, we all come from different backgrounds, different family lives, whatever, but you're opening that door for people to
Yeah.
see. And then they still have to walk their own path. They still
Yeah.
have to, you know, turn their mess into their message, or find that
Yes.
message in
Yeah.
some of that misery. And, you know, I truly believe, you know, that our parents and our parents' parents like do the best with the tools that they have. And so
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of, you know, what I coach on, especially in communication and things like that, is to like, okay, I know it's frustrating. And I found myself super angry for a while. I was like
Mm,
angry that my parents didn't know better. But then it's like
mm,
when you do the, let's say, the social studies within your own family. So you start to
yeah.
look back at your family line, your
It's a
own history
generational
book.
cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, you get to see like, okay, well, my parents were raised like this, and this is where
Yeah.
my grandparents came from. So like,
Yeah.
how in the world can I expect them to have those tools? Like, was my ownership moment where it's like they didn't have that, and now this is your turn, London. So if you choose to stay
Mm-hmm.
angry and you choose to, you know, be pissed off and point the blame at somebody else's fault,
Yeah.
that's your choice. And then I have my niece, she's 5, and I'm like, oh no, like this is my job. It's my job
Mm.
to do the communication. It's my job to teach about feelings and ways to regulate your nervous system, and that it's okay to
Wow.
feel a certain type of way. But
Yeah.
you can't see it here in the video. And of course, those people that are listening can't see it either. But I have a picture of my great grandmother on my shelf up here because it reminds me of her, who came from Italy to America, didn't know anyone, arranged
Yeah.
marriage, no choice, you know,
Oof.
never saw her family again. There was not like cell phones and FaceTimes and ways to stay connected. Like
That's hard.
I know, when she found out that her mother died, she found out because they took a picture of her dead mother in the casket and then they mailed it to her. And when we were cleaning out her stuff
Oh.
after she passed away,
Ugh.
my cousin found that picture, right, of like her dead mom. And we were like, what is this? And we were like, oh, well, that was a nice delivery
Yeah.
message. So it's
Yeah.
like, of course she didn't have the tools that we have
Yeah.
now. And there's so much gratitude for the hardships that she went through,
Mm-hmm.
because now I get to have, you know, like we talked about in the beginning, I can do whatever I want. I can have whatever jobs I want. I get to live my dream of being able to
Yeah.
travel the world and live wherever I want. And now I'm in the mountains and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to go to Cabo after Christmas. Like, that's not
Yeah.
because I just did it all on my own. That's like a lot of sacrifices along the
Mm-hmm.
line that I think allowed me to appreciate that a little bit more. And
Totally.
then, of course, feelings of anxiety and stress and all of that. Oh my gosh, I bet you and not to discount my feelings because I want to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
all feelings are valid, but it's like my anxiety and stress is like, when I look at it, it's like, you know, grains of sand compared to the mounds of stress and anxiety she must have felt,
Wow.
you know, moving to a different country and not having her you know, all these different things. And so I just share that
Mm-hmm.
because that's been so healing for me. And I think we have to look back. We have to like do our own
Yeah.
social studies work, you know, and like go back in our own history class of our own family line. And like you said, that funnel where it's like you get to that
Yeah.
point where you're like, oh, I can't do anything but say thank you. Like I am no longer angry. Like I am so grateful for all of that foundational groundwork
Mm-hmm.
that led me to be where I am at now,
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
it gives me goosebumps even talking about it right now.
Yeah, and it's so powerful what you just said, London, because it's like honestly, the I agree too. Like for we all, let's be real. No matter how amazing your childhood was, we all have stuff. We all have baggage. Nothing is perfect. And it's a powerful thing because in the healing journey, I call it undoing the doing. Something was once done, but you're peeling away those layers. And for most adults, not all, but the ones that are self-aware and are open and on that healing journey, their walkabout, I call it, like in Australia, they're on their walkabout, you know, when you reach, I think like 25 and just beyond in those years, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, as you literally just start looking back and questioning things, which is good. That's a part of the journey. You question, did I really love this tradition and this belief about love and the way that my parents were strict and, did this and that and that. And, you have to realize that it is, it's so powerful when you can, go through kind of the 7 stages of grief where maybe you feel angry, but you feel into it. And then you maybe, pass through different emotions of gratitude and acceptance and etc. And for me, I know for sure, like and you look back at maybe your parents, the way that they were raised, maybe they're just doing the best that they could with what they knew. I mean, if we think about it, our parents, mine grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. Times were very different. And then if you look back a different generation, my grandparents grew up in the 40s and 50s, like they grew up, it was very much survival, depression, after the depression, just get a job, just go to college, and you're the Betty Crocker at home if you're a girl. Like, times were so different. My grandma got married at 22 and had her first child at 23, and it's fascinating to me. And she's been through so much. Like she's, been a widow like she's been through a lot and she's still so strong. And I just think that generation, went through so much, but no one talked about things. It was just very much like, oh, mental health under the rug. Oh, you're, gay or lesbian or, oh, under the rug. And it makes me sad to think back. I feel so grateful to grow up in this generation because, it makes me sad to look back and to think about how much shame and isolation people went through in that day and age where, God forbid, they didn't want to go to college or they resonated with a different sexuality. I mean, they were just like shunned or they had to push it down. And I feel like when you bottle up your emotions or when you suppress who you really are, it just manifests in such unhealthy ways. Or you want to drink away the pain, or you think something is wrong with you, but it's so not true. And so I think, just like the whole Parenting Forgiveness Act, it's a really beautiful journey when, you can get to a point and look back, like for you, London, and be like, you know what? I'm so grateful because all of that conditionings and the teachings and the way that I grew up, it did somehow shape me into this successful person that I am today. It did give me the drive. And, like for me, sometimes, I look back and I'm like, my anxiety though, it did motivate the crap out of me because I'm like, I never want to feel this way again. So it serves a purpose. And I really think in those moments, I think of all of my favorite leaders and speakers and gurus that I look up to, like, Ed Milet or Tony Robbins. I mean, they grew up in very difficult households. Like Tony Robbins had an abusive alcoholic mother, grew up extremely poor, but if he didn't have that upbringing, he would not be the person that he is today. That gave him so much drive, and it probably taught him a lot about reading people and just so many little skills that shaped him into the powerful speaker that he is today. And I would never say that childhood is so not difficult and traumatizing, but it all serves a bigger purpose. And that's why I always say, it's happening for you, not to you. But I think it's just, life is one giant, unlayering, removing, healing, going inward. And we're all on this journey. All humans are. So.
Mm-hmm.